My name is Haley Richardson, and I'm 28 years old. At exactly 1:03 a.m., my phone rang with the kind of call that changes everything. My mother's voice was hysterical, barely recognizable through her sobbing. "Haley, Derek's been in a terrible accident. He's unconscious in the ICU and needs emergency surgery right now. Insurance won't cover it. We need $22,000 immediately, or he's going to die." My father grabbed the phone, his voice shaking with panic. "You have to wire the money now. Every minute counts." But when I asked which hospital, the line went dead. Before we dive into this shocking story of family betrayal and deception, I'd love to know where you're watching from. Drop your location in the comments below, and don't forget to hit that like button and subscribe for more incredible true stories that will leave you speechless. Trust me, you won't believe where this nightmare leads. Let's get started. I sat there in my dark apartment, staring at my phone in complete shock. I had just finished a grueling 12-hour shift at the hospital where I work as an ICU nurse, and exhaustion weighed heavy on my shoulders. But this was my baby brother Derek we were talking about. The same Derek I had practically raised while our parents struggled with debt and addiction issues throughout our childhood. The same Derek whose college tuition I had paid by working double shifts and sacrificing my own dreams of pursuing a master's degree in nursing. My family had always labeled me as the responsible one, the rock everyone could lean on when things got tough. When Derek wanted to study business at the expensive private university across state, I didn't hesitate to drain my savings to make his dream possible. When Mom needed money for her prescription medications, I was there. When Dad's construction business went under and they faced foreclosure, I took out a personal loan to help them keep the house. It wasn't just expected anymore, it was assumed that Haley would fix everything. At 3 in the morning, my phone rang again. This time it was Mom, and her crying was so intense I could barely understand her words. "Haley, baby, I'm so sorry we got cut off. The cell service here at the hospital is terrible. Derek is in critical condition at Memorial Hospital about 3 hours north of here. The doctors say he has massive internal bleeding and multiple fractures. They need to operate immediately, but the surgery costs $22,000 up front because it's considered experimental." Before I could ask any questions, Dad's voice boomed through the phone. "Haley, this is life or death. Your brother might not make it through the night if we don't get this money right now. The doctors are standing by, but they won't start the surgery without payment. You're the only one who has this kind of money available immediately." I rubbed my temples, trying to process what they were telling me. Something felt off about their explanation. As an ICU nurse, I knew that emergency surgeries weren't typically delayed for payment, especially in life-threatening situations. Hospitals were legally required to provide emergency care regardless of insurance coverage or ability to pay. The terminology they were using didn't quite match standard medical procedures either. "Can I talk to Derek's doctor?" I asked, hoping to get clearer information about his condition and treatment options. "No, absolutely not," Dad snapped immediately. "They have strict COVID protocols here. Only immediate family can be in the ICU area, and they're not allowing phone calls to preserve patient privacy. Besides, every minute we waste talking is another minute Derek could be dying." Mom took the phone back, her voice breaking with emotion. "Haley, please. I know this is a lot to ask, but Derek is all we have. You know how much he means to us. Remember when he was little and you used to read him bedtime stories every night? Remember how proud you were when he graduated college because of your sacrifice? He needs you now more than ever." The guilt hit me like a physical blow. They were right about everything. Derek had been my pride and joy growing up. When our parents were too caught up in their own problems to pay attention to him, I stepped in as his protector and provider. I had worked my way through nursing school while simultaneously supporting his education and our family's basic needs. The love I felt for him was genuine and deep, which made this situation even more heartbreaking. But despite the emotional manipulation and the urgency in their voices, my professional instincts kept nagging at me. The medical details they provided seemed inconsistent, and their refusal to let me speak with healthcare providers directly was highly unusual. Most families in crisis were desperate to have medical professionals explain the situation to anyone who might be able to help or provide support. Over the next 2 hours, my parents called repeatedly with increasingly elaborate and detailed descriptions of Derek's supposed injuries. According to their latest update, he had suffered severe internal bleeding in his abdomen, 3 broken ribs, a collapsed lung, and a hairline fracture in his skull. They claimed the accident happened when a drunk driver ran a red light and slammed into Derek's car at 60 miles per hour, causing his vehicle to flip multiple times before landing in a drainage ditch. The doctors showed us the x-rays, Mom explained through fresh tears. His spleen is ruptured, and there's fluid building up around his lungs. They said without immediate surgery to stop the internal bleeding and repair the damage, he'll go into shock within the next few hours. The experimental procedure they want to use has a 90% success rate, but insurance considers it investigational and won't cover a single penny. Dad had apparently been researching treatment options online and was throwing around medical terminology that sounded impressive but didn't quite fit together correctly. He mentioned things like emergency splenectomy with thoracic decompression and traumatic hemothorax requiring immediate intervention. While these were real medical terms, the way he combined them suggested he was reading from internet searches rather than speaking from actual conversations with medical professionals. They even sent me photos through text message that they claimed were taken at the hospital. The images showed a sterile-looking hallway, some medical equipment, and what appeared to be Derek lying unconscious in a hospital bed. However, when I looked closer at the photos, several details bothered me. The timestamp on one image showed it was taken 3 days ago, not tonight. The medical equipment visible in the background was outdated compared to what most modern hospitals used. Most concerning, the person in the hospital bed was positioned in a way that made it impossible to clearly see their face. Around 5:30 in the morning, Uncle Leonard called to confirm everything my parents had told me. Leonard was Dad's younger brother, someone I had always respected for his apparent success in business and his level-headed approach to family problems. "Haley, I'm here at the hospital with your parents," he said in a serious, authoritative tone. "I've spoken with the medical team myself, and the situation is exactly as dire as your folks described. Derek's hanging on by a thread, kid. The surgery team is scrubbed and ready to go, but hospital policy requires full payment before they can proceed with this particular procedure." Leonard's confirmation carried significant weight with me because he had never been involved in the family's financial dramas before. He had his own successful contracting business, owned his house outright, and had never asked anyone for money or gotten caught up in emotional manipulation. If Leonard was vouching for the situation, it seemed much more credible. "I would cover this cost myself if I could," he continued, "but I just invested everything I have in a new business expansion. My cash flow is tied up for the next several weeks. You're the only family member in a position to help Derek right now. I know it's a huge amount to ask, but we're talking about saving your brother's life." I walked to my laptop and checked my savings account balance. The number that appeared on screen represented 3 years of careful budgeting, skipped vacations, ignored social invitations, and countless overtime shifts at the hospital. $22,417. It was supposed to be the down payment on my first house, a small 2-bedroom place I had been dreaming about for months. I had already been pre-approved for a mortgage and was planning to start house hunting seriously within the next few weeks. The weight of the decision felt crushing. On one hand, Derek was my beloved little brother, and the thought of him dying because I hesitated to send money was unbearable. On the other hand, something about this entire situation felt wrong in a way I couldn't quite articulate. The medical explanations were inconsistent, the timeline seemed rushed, and the refusal to allow any verification of Derek's condition was highly suspicious. As I sat there staring at my computer screen, Brittany sent me a series of voice messages through social media. Derek had married Brittany about 8 months ago in a small ceremony that I helped pay for, naturally. Her messages were heartbreaking, filled with sobbing and desperate pleas. "Haley, I don't know what to do. Derek is everything to me, and I can't lose him. The doctors say this surgery is his only chance. Please, I'm begging you, help us save him. I promise we'll pay you back as soon as possible. Derek's been talking about asking for a raise at the bank, and we'll figure out a way to get you the money back within a few months. Unable to sleep and driven by my nursing instincts to verify patient information, I decided to call Memorial Hospital directly at 5:15 in the morning. I figured that even if there were visitor restrictions, hospital staff should be able to confirm whether a patient was admitted and provide general information about visiting policies or how family members could get updates. The hospital operator was polite and professional when I explained that I was trying to get information about my brother Derek Richardson, who had supposedly been admitted following a serious car accident. After being transferred to the emergency department, then to the ICU, and finally to patient information services, the answer was consistently the same: there was no patient named Derek Richardson currently admitted to Memorial Hospital. They had no record of anyone by that name being treated in their emergency department within the last 24 hours. Thinking that perhaps my parents had gotten confused about which hospital Derek was taken to, I called 3 other major medical centers in the area. Riverside General, St. Mary's Medical Center, and County Hospital all gave me identical responses. No Derek Richardson. No record of a major car accident victim matching his description. No experimental surgeries scheduled requiring immediate payment. When I called my parents back to ask for clarification, their story immediately began to shift in concerning ways. "Oh, we were mistaken about Memorial Hospital," Dad said, sounding annoyed that I had even bothered to check. Derek was transferred to a private medical facility that specializes in trauma surgery. They have better equipment and more experienced surgeons for this type of complex procedure. "What's the name of this private facility?" I asked, pulling up Google to search for trauma centers in their area. "It's called, Advanced Trauma Solutions," Mom jumped in quickly. "It's a very exclusive place that most people haven't heard of. They only take the most serious cases, and they have partnerships with major teaching hospitals around the country." I spent 20 minutes searching online for any medical facility with that name or anything similar. Nothing came up. No website, no reviews, no medical licensing information, no news articles about a specialized trauma center in their region. When I pressed them for an address or phone number so I could verify Derek's condition myself, they became increasingly hostile and defensive. "Haley, I can't believe you're wasting time playing detective when your brother could be dying," Dad's voice was sharp with anger. "This isn't some game where you get to question every detail. Derek needs surgery right now, not in an hour after you've satisfied your curiosity about hospital protocols." The story continued to evolve throughout our conversation. Initially, they had said Derek was hit by a drunk driver who ran a red light. Now they were claiming it was a hit-and-run accident where the other driver fled the scene immediately. Then Dad mentioned something about Derek's accident being connected to his work at the bank, suggesting that he might have been deliberately targeted because of his access to financial information. "Wait, what does Derek's job at the bank have to do with a car accident?" I asked, completely confused by this new detail that made no sense in context. "Look, there are some things about Derek's situation that are complicated and sensitive," Uncle Leonard interjected, having apparently taken the phone from my parents. "He's been working on some high-profile accounts lately, and there's a possibility this wasn't just a random accident. That's why he's at a private facility instead of a regular hospital. For his own protection and privacy." This explanation raised even more red flags. Derek worked as a basic teller at a small community bank. He processed routine transactions, helped customers with account questions, and occasionally assisted with simple loan applications. The idea that his job would involve high-profile accounts or put him at risk of being deliberately targeted was completely absurd. If Derek was the victim of an intentional attack related to his work, wouldn't the police be involved? Wouldn't the FBI investigate if this was connected to bank security or financial crimes? I asked, trying to understand how their new version of events could possibly make sense. "The police are involved, but they want to keep everything quiet while they investigate," Dad explained impatiently. That's exactly why we can't give you all the details over the phone. That's why Derek is at a secure medical facility instead of a regular hospital. That's why everything has to be handled immediately and discreetly. But their explanations were becoming more convoluted and contradictory with each passing minute. They couldn't provide the name of the police detective handling the case. They couldn't give me the phone number for the private facility where Derek was supposedly being treated. They couldn't explain why this secure medical center would require upfront payment for emergency surgery when regular hospitals were legally required to provide life-saving care regardless of payment arrangements. Mom started crying again, but this time her tears seemed more angry than sad. "Haley, I'm your mother, and I'm telling you that Derek is dying. Are you really going to let your own brother die because you don't trust your family? Are you really going to choose $22,000 over Derek's life? What kind of person have you become?" By 7 in the morning, I had made a decision that would change everything. Instead of sending money based on an increasingly unbelievable story, I was going to drive to Derek's apartment to see what I could find out about his actual situation. If he really was in the hospital fighting for his life, surely there would be some evidence at his home. Maybe Brittany had left information about which hospital they had taken him to, or perhaps neighbors had witnessed the accident and could provide details that matched my family's claims. Derek and Brittany lived in a modest 2-bedroom apartment complex about 45 minutes from my place. I had helped them move in 6 months ago, and I still had a spare key that Derek had given me for emergencies. When I arrived at their building, the first thing I noticed was a bright orange eviction notice taped to their front door. The notice was dated 2 weeks ago and stated that Derek and Brittany were being evicted for non-payment of rent. According to the document, they owed 3 months of back rent totaling $4,800, plus late fees and court costs. Using my spare key, I entered the apartment and found it almost completely empty. All of Derek and Brittany's furniture was gone. Their personal belongings had been cleared out. The only items remaining were some basic kitchen appliances that belonged to the apartment complex and a few pieces of mail scattered on the floor. Most shocking of all, there was no sign that anyone had been living there recently. The refrigerator was empty and unplugged. The utilities had been shut off. Even the cable and internet connections had been disconnected. I knocked on the door of the neighboring apartment, hoping to get information from people who might have seen Derek and Brittany recently. Mrs. Patterson, an elderly woman who had lived in the complex for over a decade, was happy to chat about what had been happening with my brother and his wife. "Oh honey, they moved out about 10 days ago," she told me while sipping coffee on her small balcony. It was quite a scene, actually. They had a big moving truck here at like 2 in the morning, loading up all their furniture and boxes. Seemed like they were in a real hurry to get out of here. I thought it was strange timing, but young people these days do things differently than we used to. According to Mrs. Patterson, Derek and Brittany had been fighting loudly and frequently over the past month. She had heard arguments about money, jobs, and what sounded like Derek being in some kind of serious trouble. "That poor girl was crying almost every night," she explained sympathetically. "And Derek seemed real stressed about something. He was getting phone calls at all hours, and I could hear him pacing around the apartment talking in this panicked voice." Another neighbor, a college student named Jake who lived across the hallway, provided even more disturbing information. "Yeah, Derek quit his job at the bank like 3 weeks ago," Jake told me. "He seemed really upset about it too. When I asked him what happened, he said something about complications at work and that he needed to figure some things out. He and his wife were definitely planning to leave town. I saw them loading up expensive electronics and stuff into their car multiple times over the past week." This information completely contradicted everything my family had told me. According to them, Derek was supposed to be working his regular shift at the bank when the accident occurred. They had mentioned his job as recently as 30 minutes ago when they were explaining why he might have been deliberately targeted. But if Derek had quit his job 3 weeks ago and moved out of his apartment 10 days ago, where had he actually been, and what had he been doing? When I confronted my parents with this evidence, their reaction was explosive and immediate. Instead of surprise or confusion about Derek's living situation, they became furious with me for interfering and betraying family trust by investigating their story. "How dare you go snooping around Derek's private business when he's lying in a hospital fighting for his life," Mom screamed into the phone, her voice filled with a rage I had never heard before. "You're supposed to be helping your brother, not playing detective and violating his privacy." Dad was even more aggressive in his response. "Haley, you're out of line here. Derek and Brittany moved to a new place recently for security reasons related to his work situation. The fact that you didn't know about it just proves how little you've been paying attention to your own family. Meanwhile, every minute you waste on this nonsense investigation is another minute Derek could be dying." Uncle Leonard's reaction was perhaps the most disturbing of all. His previous calm, authoritative demeanor completely disappeared, and he became accusatory and manipulative in a way that shocked me. "Haley, I'm really disappointed in you," he said in a cold, harsh tone. "Your brother has always looked up to you, and now when he needs you most, you're acting like some kind of paranoid detective instead of a loving sister. Derek has always said you were the strongest person in the family, but right now you're showing yourself to be selfish and heartless." The psychological pressure they were applying felt overwhelming and coordinated. They weren't just asking for money anymore, they were systematically attacking my character, my motivations, and my love for Derek. They were making me question my own perceptions and instincts, suggesting that my perfectly reasonable concerns were actually evidence of my failure as a sister and family member. Brittany's harassment escalated as well. She began sending me photos of herself crying, along with text messages that were clearly designed to maximize guilt and emotional manipulation. "Derek is going to die because his own sister cares more about money than family," one message read. "He always told me how much he loved you and how grateful he was for everything you sacrificed for him. He's going to be so heartbroken to learn that you abandoned him when he needed you most." Within the next hour, I started receiving phone calls from extended family members who had somehow learned about Derek's supposed accident and my refusal to provide money for his surgery. Aunts, uncles, and cousins were calling to express their shock and disappointment in my behavior. They had clearly been given a version of events that painted me as the villain in this story, the selfish sister who was letting her brother die over money. "Haley, I can't believe what I'm hearing about Derek's situation," my cousin Michelle called to say. "Uncle Russell told us that Derek is in critical condition and needs emergency surgery, but you're refusing to help because you're angry about some apartment situation. Is that really true? Are you really going to let family pride get in the way of saving Derek's life?" The coordination of these calls felt deliberate and orchestrated. Family members were contacting me with almost identical talking points, suggesting that someone had reached out to them with a specific narrative about Derek's condition and my response. They were all urging me to do the right thing and put family first, while simultaneously expressing disappointment and shock in my character. Feeling completely overwhelmed and emotionally manipulated by my family's increasingly aggressive tactics, I decided to reach out to my best friend Natalie Chen for support and advice. Natalie and I had been friends since nursing school, and she worked as a police dispatcher for the county sheriff's department. If anyone could help me figure out how to verify Derek's situation or investigate what was really happening, it would be her. When I explained the entire situation to Natalie, her reaction was immediate and concerned. "Haley, this sounds like a classic family scam," she said bluntly. "I've seen cases like this before where family members coordinate to pressure one person into giving them money by creating fake emergencies. The fact that they won't let you verify Derek's condition independently is a major red flag." Natalie helped me file a welfare check request for Derek through the proper channels. A welfare check would involve police officers attempting to locate Derek and verify his safety and well-being. If he really was in a hospital recovering from serious injuries, the officers would be able to confirm his condition and location. If he wasn't in a hospital, the welfare check might help us figure out where he actually was and what was really going on. While we waited for the welfare check results, the harassment from my family continued to escalate in frightening ways. They were no longer just calling and texting, They had apparently launched a coordinated social media campaign designed to publicly shame me into compliance. Posts appeared on Facebook describing Derek's critical condition and asking for prayers and support. These posts also mentioned that Derek's own sister was refusing to help save his life, despite having the resources to do so. The psychological pressure was becoming unbearable. I found myself questioning my own judgment and wondering if I was making a terrible mistake. What if Derek really was in the hospital, and I was letting my paranoia and suspicion prevent me from saving his life? What if the inconsistencies in their story had reasonable explanations that I was too stressed to understand? What if my professional medical knowledge was actually interfering with my ability to trust my family during a genuine emergency? But at the same time, the evidence against their story was mounting. My investigation of Derek's apartment had clearly shown that he and Brittany had moved out over a week ago under mysterious circumstances. His former neighbor had confirmed that Derek had quit his job at the bank weeks before the supposed accident. The hospitals I had called had no record of treating anyone matching Derek's description. The private medical facility my parents claimed he had been transferred to didn't appear to exist. Around noon, I decided to drive to Derek's former workplace at First National Community Bank to see if I could get more information about why he had left his job and whether there had been any security issues or high-profile accounts involved. The bank manager, Mrs. Rodriguez, was someone I had met several times during family gatherings, and she had always been friendly and professional. "Oh, Haley, I'm so glad you stopped by," Mrs. Rodriguez said when I explained that I was trying to get in touch with Derek about a family matter. "Actually, I was hoping someone from Derek's family would contact us soon. We've been trying to reach him about some irregularities we discovered after his resignation." My heart sank as Mrs. Rodriguez explained that Derek had resigned from his position 3 weeks ago, but not under the circumstances my family had described. Derek submitted his resignation very suddenly, with no advance notice, she told me. He claimed he had received a better job offer in another state and needed to leave immediately. But after he left, our auditing department discovered some discrepancies in several customer accounts that Derek had been managing. The discrepancies Mrs. Rodriguez described were serious financial irregularities involving unauthorized transfers and missing funds from customer accounts. The bank's investigation had revealed that approximately $89,000 had been moved from various accounts into temporary holding accounts that Derek had access to. While the bank was still working with law enforcement to determine exactly what had happened, Derek was definitely a person of interest in what appeared to be embezzlement or fraud. "We've been trying to contact Derek for the past 2 weeks to discuss these irregularities and give him an opportunity to explain what happened," Mrs. Rodriguez continued. "But his phone number has been disconnected, and we learned that he moved out of his apartment. If you're in touch with him, could you please ask him to contact us immediately? The longer this situation goes unresolved, the more serious the legal consequences could become." This information completely transformed my understanding of what was happening with my family's supposed emergency. Derek wasn't the victim of a car accident, he was apparently fleeing from serious financial crimes. The high-profile accounts and security issues my parents had mentioned weren't about Derek being targeted by criminals, they were about Derek potentially being a criminal himself. When I shared this information with Natalie, she immediately understood the implications. "Haley, your family isn't trying to get money to save Derek's life," she said grimly. "They're trying to get money to help him escape from the consequences of stealing nearly $90,000 from his job. The emotional manipulation, the coordination of family members, the fake emergency story, this is all designed to get you to give them cash that Derek can use to disappear before the police catch up with him." That evening, the harassment from my family reached a new level of intensity and desperation. Uncle Leonard showed up at my apartment at 2 o'clock in the morning, pounding on my door and demanding that I let him in to discuss Derek's situation face to face. When I refused to open the door, he became increasingly aggressive and threatening. "Haley, open this door right now," Leonard shouted loud enough to wake my neighbors. "We need to talk about Derek, and this conversation is going to happen whether you want it or not. You can either let me in voluntarily, or I can make this a lot more difficult for everyone involved." I called building security and threatened to contact the police if Leonard didn't leave immediately. His behavior was completely unlike the calm, reasonable uncle I had known for years. The desperation in his voice and his willingness to show up uninvited in the middle of the night suggested that whatever was really happening with Derek was far more serious than a medical emergency. At exactly 6:47 in the morning, my phone rang with a call that would finally reveal the truth about Derek's situation. Detective Vincent Torres from the Las Vegas Metropolitan Police Department introduced himself and asked if I was Derek Richardson's sister. My heart started pounding as I confirmed my identity and braced myself for whatever news he was about to deliver. Ms. Richardson, I'm calling to inform you that your brother Derek and his wife Brittany were arrested last night at McCarran International Airport attempting to board a flight to Mexico, Detective Torres explained in a professional, matter-of-fact tone. They were taken into custody on charges related to embezzlement and money laundering involving approximately $89,000 stolen from First National Community Bank. I felt like the entire world had shifted beneath my feet. After hours of emotional manipulation, guilt, fear, and confusion, the truth was finally coming out. Derek wasn't lying unconscious in an ICU fighting for his life. He had been on the run from law enforcement, apparently trying to flee the country with stolen money. Detective Torres, my family has been telling me that Derek was in a serious car accident and needed emergency surgery, I said, still trying to process this shocking revelation. They've been demanding that I send $22,000 immediately to save his life. There was no car accident, Ms. Richardson, the detective confirmed. Your brother and his wife have been planning this escape for several weeks. During questioning, Derek admitted that the entire family emergency was fabricated to extract money from you that would help fund their flight to Mexico. Detective Torres explained that Derek had been under investigation by both the bank's security department and local law enforcement for the past 2 weeks. Bank auditors had discovered the missing funds shortly after Derek's sudden resignation, and investigators had been tracking his activities and communications since then. Derek and Brittany had used false identities to book their flight to Mexico, but airport security had flagged them during routine screening. The most shocking part of Detective Torres's explanation was how extensively my family had been involved in planning and executing this scam. During his confession, Derek provided detailed information about how the scheme was organized, the detective told me. Your parents and your uncle Leonard were fully aware of the stolen money and had been helping Derek plan his escape for over a month. According to Derek's confession, Uncle Leonard had been the mastermind behind the fake emergency story. Leonard had convinced my parents that I would be an easy target for emotional manipulation because of my history of supporting the family financially and my close relationship with Derek. They had researched my work schedule, my savings account balance, and even my psychological vulnerabilities to craft a story that would be most likely to succeed in extracting money from me. Your brother told us that the family had been planning this for months, Detective Torres continued. Leonard suggested using a fake medical emergency because he believed your background as a nurse would make you more likely to act quickly without asking too many questions. They studied medical terminology online to make their story sound convincing, and they even researched hospital policies and emergency procedures to anticipate your potential questions. The coordination and planning that had gone into this scam was absolutely breathtaking. They had prepared fake photos, practiced their emotional responses, recruited extended family members to apply pressure, and even planned how to respond to my various attempts to verify Derek's condition. When I called hospitals looking for Derek, they were ready with explanations about private facilities and security protocols. When I discovered that Derek had moved out of his apartment, they were prepared to claim it was for security reasons related to his work. Detective Torres also revealed that this wasn't the first time Uncle Leonard had orchestrated similar schemes. Leonard Hayes has been a person of interest in several financial fraud investigations over the past 5 years, he explained. We believe he's been running family-based scams targeting different relatives and family friends. Your brother's theft from the bank appears to have been Leonard's idea, and the plan to extract money from you was designed to provide additional funding for Derek's escape. The most devastating part of this revelation was learning how long my family had been planning to betray me. This wasn't a desperate, last-minute attempt to help Derek after he had gotten into trouble. This was a calculated, long-term plan to manipulate and exploit me financially. They had deliberately created a crisis designed to pressure me into giving up my life savings, and they had been prepared to let me believe that my own brother had died because of my refusal to help. Ms. Richardson, I want you to know that you're not in any legal trouble related to this situation, Detective Torres assured me. Derek made it clear that you had no knowledge of the bank theft and that you were an intended victim of this fraud scheme. However, I would strongly recommend that you consider filing harassment charges against the family members who participated in pressuring you for money. As I hung up the phone after speaking with Detective Torres, I felt a combination of relief, anger, and profound sadness that was difficult to process. Relief that Derek wasn't actually dying, that I hadn't made a terrible mistake by refusing to send money, and that my professional instincts had been correct about the inconsistencies in their story. Anger that my own family had been willing to put me through such emotional torture for financial gain. And sadness that the people I loved most in the world had been planning to betray me in such a calculated and heartless way. The phone call from Detective Torres had answered all of my questions about Derek's supposed accident, but it had also raised new questions about my family's behavior and motivations that were even more disturbing than the original fake emergency. Within an hour of my conversation with Detective Torres, I called my parents to confront them with the truth about Derek's arrest and the fake emergency they had orchestrated. Instead of shame, remorse, or apologetic explanations, their response was to double down on their manipulation and blame me for Derek's legal troubles. "Haley, I hope you're satisfied now," Mom said in a cold, bitter tone that I had never heard her use before. "Your brother is sitting in a jail cell because you called the police on your own family. Derek is facing serious charges because you couldn't trust us enough to help when we needed you most." This reaction was absolutely stunning to me. Even when confronted with undeniable proof that they had been lying about a fake medical emergency, my parents were continuing to manipulate and gaslight me. They were actually trying to make me feel guilty about Derek's arrest, as if his decision to steal nearly $90,000 was somehow my fault. Dad took the phone and continued the attack. Derek only took that money because he was desperate and panicked about his financial situation. He knew you had the resources to help him get back on his feet, but instead of supporting your family, you chose to be suspicious and selfish. If you had just sent the money like we asked, Derek would never have had to resort to stealing. Their logic was completely backwards and morally bankrupt. They were suggesting that Derek's crime was justified because I hadn't given him money that he had never actually asked for. They were blaming me for not preventing a crime that I had no knowledge of. They were making me responsible for Derek's choices and legal consequences, even though I had been deliberately kept in the dark about his actual situation. Uncle Leonard's response was even more disturbing when he called me later that morning. Instead of acknowledging his role in orchestrating this scam, he became aggressive and threatening in a way that made me genuinely fear for my safety. "Haley, you have no idea what you've done," Leonard said in a menacing tone. "Derek was about to be free and clear with a new life in Mexico, and you destroyed everything by being a paranoid, untrusting bitch. Now there are serious people who are very upset about this situation, and they're going to be looking for someone to blame." Leonard's threats were vague but clearly intended to intimidate me. He suggested that Derek's theft had somehow involved serious people who would hold me responsible for interfering with their plans. He implied that my safety could be at risk because I had contacted law enforcement instead of simply sending money as demanded. "You better hope Derek keeps his mouth shut about certain aspects of this situation," Leonard continued ominously. "Because if the wrong people find out that you're the one who got him arrested, you might find yourself in a very dangerous position." These threats were particularly disturbing because they suggested that Derek's embezzlement might have involved more than just his own initiative. Leonard's references to serious people and his concerns about Derek revealing certain aspects of the situation implied that there might have been organized crime connections or other criminal enterprises involved in the bank theft. The harassment from extended family members continued throughout the day, but now their tone had shifted from disappointment to outright hostility. Instead of urging me to do the right thing and help Derek, they were now attacking me for betraying family and getting Derek arrested through my investigation. Cousin Michelle called back, but this time her voice was filled with anger and accusation. "Haley, I can't believe you called the police on your own brother. Whatever mistakes Derek might have made, family is supposed to stick together and protect each other. Now Derek is facing prison time because you chose to side with the police over your own blood." These family members had clearly been given a new narrative that painted Derek as a victim of circumstances and me as the person responsible for his legal troubles. They weren't being told about the extensive planning that had gone into the fake emergency scam, or about Leonard's history of financial fraud, or about the systematic manipulation I had been subjected to over the past 24 hours. Perhaps the most shocking revelation came when I discovered that my family's betrayal extended far beyond this single incident. While cleaning out my personal documents to prepare for potential legal proceedings, I found evidence that my family had been systematically stealing from me for years without my knowledge. There were forged checks drawn on my account dating back over 2 years, with my signature apparently copied from legitimate documents I had signed. Credit cards had been opened in my name using my social security number and personal information, with bills being sent to addresses I didn't recognize so I would never see them. My mail had been periodically stolen to hide evidence of these unauthorized accounts and prevent me from discovering the identity theft. When I contacted my bank and credit card companies to investigate these discrepancies, the scope of the theft was staggering. Over the past 3 years, my family had stolen approximately $47,000 through various fraudulent means. They had used my credit to make purchases, taken cash advances, and even taken out a small personal loan using my identity as collateral. The most heartbreaking discovery was that Derek had been actively participating in this theft throughout our relationship. While I was working overtime shifts to support his college education and help with family expenses, he was simultaneously stealing thousands of dollars from my accounts. The brother I had sacrificed for, the person I loved more than anyone else in the world, had been systematically robbing me while accepting my financial support and emotional care. Brittany had also been involved in the long-term theft scheme. Her tearful voice messages and emotional manipulation during the fake emergency had been part of a pattern of deception that went back to the beginning of her relationship with Derek. She had helped him access my personal information, forge my signature on fraudulent documents, and even intercept my mail to hide evidence of their crimes. The realization that my family's betrayal wasn't limited to the fake emergency, but represented years of systematic exploitation and theft, was emotionally devastating. Every sacrifice I had made, every dollar I had given to help them, every time I had prioritized their needs over my own financial security, had been met with calculated deception and criminal activity designed to steal even more money from me. After discovering the full extent of my family's betrayal and criminal activity, I knew that I needed professional legal help to protect myself and pursue justice. I contacted Caroline Foster, a criminal defense and family law attorney who had been recommended by Natalie's contacts in law enforcement. Caroline had experience with financial fraud cases and family-based scams, and she immediately understood the severity of my situation. "Haley, what your family has done to you constitutes multiple serious crimes," Caroline explained during our first consultation. The fake emergency scam alone could be prosecuted as conspiracy to commit fraud, but when you add in the years of identity theft, forged checks, and unauthorized credit accounts, we're looking at a pattern of criminal activity that could result in significant prison time for everyone involved. Caroline helped me organize all the evidence I had gathered about my family's crimes, recorded phone calls from the fake emergency, text messages showing their coordination and threats, financial records documenting years of theft, bank statements showing forged checks and unauthorized transactions, and credit reports revealing fraudulent accounts opened in my name. Working with Detective Torres and the Financial Crimes Division, Caroline was able to build a comprehensive case that revealed the full scope of the conspiracy against me. The investigation uncovered that Uncle Leonard had been running similar scams on other family members and family friends for over 5 years, stealing hundreds of thousands of dollars through various fraudulent schemes. Leonard's criminal history was extensive and disturbing. He had convinced elderly relatives to give him power of attorney over their finances, then systematically emptied their accounts before disappearing for months at a time. He had orchestrated fake medical emergencies involving other family members to extract money from their siblings and children. He had even run romance scams targeting lonely widows in the community, pretending to be interested in romantic relationships while stealing their savings and retirement funds. Derek's confession to Detective Torres revealed the intricate planning that had gone into targeting me specifically for the fake emergency scam. Leonard spent months studying Haley's psychology and financial situation, Derek admitted during questioning. He knew exactly how much money she had saved, when she worked her hospital shifts, and what kind of emotional manipulation would be most effective with her. The planning had been disturbingly thorough and calculated. Leonard had researched medical terminology to make their fake emergency story sound convincing. He had studied hospital policies and emergency procedures to anticipate my questions. He had even practiced emotional responses with my parents to ensure their performance would be believable during phone calls. Most shocking of all, Derek revealed that the family had been planning this scam for months, waiting for the right opportunity to execute their plan. Leonard had convinced them that stealing from the bank would provide seed money for Derek's escape to Mexico, but that they would need additional funding from family members to ensure the plan's success. I had been identified as the most likely source of this additional money because of my history of financially supporting the family and my close relationship with Derek. Leonard told us that Haley would never suspect her own family of lying about Derek being in danger, Derek confessed to investigators. He said her nursing background would make her act quickly in a medical emergency without asking too many questions. He was convinced that we could get at least $20,000 from her before she had time to investigate or verify our story. The confession also revealed that if their fake emergency scam had succeeded, my family was prepared to continue exploiting me indefinitely. They had discussed creating additional fake crises that would require more money, unexpected complications from Derek's fake surgery, ongoing medical expenses, legal fees related to the fake car accident, and even fake threats against Derek that would require security expenses. Caroline worked with law enforcement to file comprehensive charges against all the family members involved in the conspiracy. Derek was already facing embezzlement charges related to the bank theft, but additional charges were added for conspiracy to commit fraud and identity theft. Brittany was charged with conspiracy and fraud for her role in the emotional manipulation campaign. Uncle Leonard faced the most serious charges, including multiple counts of fraud, identity theft, elder abuse, and conspiracy. My parents presented the most complex legal situation because their participation in the fake emergency scam seemed to be motivated more by Leonard's manipulation than by independent criminal intent. However, their years of involvement in the identity theft and financial fraud against me constituted serious crimes regardless of their motivations. Caroline helped me file harassment charges against all the family members who had participated in threatening and intimidating me after Derek's arrest. The recorded phone calls and text messages provided clear evidence of their attempts to blame me for Derek's legal troubles and their efforts to make me feel responsible for his criminal choices. The most satisfying part of the legal process was recovering the money my family had stolen from me over the years. Through restitution orders and asset seizure, I was able to recover approximately $41,000 of the $47,000 they had stolen through identity theft and fraud. The remaining $6,000 was considered a loss due to interest, fees, and expenses that couldn't be recovered. Detective Torres also helped me understand how my family's crimes fit into broader patterns of financial fraud targeting family members. Family-based scams are becoming increasingly common, he explained. Criminals know that people are more likely to trust family members and less likely to verify their stories or report them to law enforcement. Your case is actually going to help us prosecute several other similar schemes in the area. The investigation revealed that Uncle Leonard had been using my family as accomplices in scams targeting other relatives and family friends. The fake emergency technique they used on me had been tested on other family members with varying degrees of success. In some cases, Leonard had convinced people to give him thousands of dollars for fake medical emergencies involving family members who were actually perfectly healthy. 6 months after the fake emergency phone call that changed everything, justice finally arrived for my family's crimes. Derek received a 4-year prison sentence for embezzlement from the bank, plus additional time for conspiracy and fraud charges related to the scam they ran against me. Brittany was sentenced to 18 months in prison for her role in the conspiracy, followed by 3 years of supervised probation. Uncle Leonard received the harshest punishment, 6 years in federal prison for orchestrating multiple fraud schemes over several years. The investigation into his activities had uncovered over 20 different victims, including elderly family members, lonely widows, and vulnerable relatives who had trusted him with their financial security. The total amount he had stolen exceeded $300,000, making his crimes serious federal offenses. My parents' legal situation was more complicated because of their claim that Leonard had manipulated them into participating in the fake emergency scam. However, their years of involvement in stealing from me through identity theft and forged checks constituted serious crimes that couldn't be dismissed simply because they claimed to be following Leonard's instructions. They received suspended sentences with 5 years of supervised probation, community service requirements, and mandatory restitution payments. The financial recovery process was more successful than I had initially hoped. Through criminal restitution orders, asset seizures, and civil judgments, I was able to recover most of the money my family had stolen from me over the years. The bank also provided additional compensation related to Derek's embezzlement case, since their security failures had indirectly contributed to the crimes against me. But the healing process was far more complex than simply recovering stolen money or seeing my family face legal consequences. The psychological and emotional damage from their betrayal required months of therapy and careful self-reflection to process and overcome. Working with a therapist who specialized in family trauma and financial abuse, I began to understand how my family had systematically conditioned me to accept exploitation as a normal part of relationships. From childhood, I had been assigned the role of the responsible one who was expected to sacrifice my own needs and goals to support other family members. This dynamic had been deliberately cultivated and maintained to make me a reliable source of financial support and emotional labor. "Haley, what your family did to you wasn't just financial fraud," my therapist explained during one of our sessions. "It was psychological abuse designed to make you doubt your own perceptions and prioritize their needs over your own well-being. The guilt, manipulation, and gaslighting you experienced are classic techniques used by abusers to maintain control over their victims." Through therapy, I learned to recognize the warning signs of manipulation and develop healthy boundaries that would protect me from future exploitation. I practiced saying no to unreasonable requests without feeling guilty. I learned to trust my own instincts and professional judgment instead of automatically deferring to family members who claimed to know better. The most difficult part of the healing process was grieving for the family I thought I had versus accepting the reality of who they actually were. For years, I had believed that our family was close, loving, and mutually supportive despite occasional financial struggles. Learning that this entire dynamic had been built on exploitation and deception was emotionally devastating. "You're not just grieving for the money they stole or the betrayal they committed," my therapist helped me understand. "You're grieving for the loving family relationship you believed you had, which turns out to have been largely fictional. That's a profound loss that requires time and patience to process." Rebuilding my life after such extensive family betrayal required creating new definitions of trust, love, and loyalty. I had to learn that real love doesn't demand self-sacrifice without reciprocity. I had to understand that healthy family relationships involve mutual respect and support, not one person constantly giving while others constantly take. 8 months after Derek's arrest, I made the decision to move to a new city and start fresh with minimal contact with my extended family. Many relatives continued to blame me for Derek's imprisonment and viewed me as a traitor who had chosen law enforcement over family loyalty. Rather than continue trying to explain or justify my actions to people who were determined to misunderstand the situation, I decided to build a new life with people who actually cared about my well-being. I found a position as a charge nurse at a trauma center in Portland, Oregon, where my experience and qualifications allowed me to advance quickly into a supervisory role. The work was challenging and rewarding, and my new colleagues became like a chosen family of people who respected my boundaries and appreciated my contributions. After a year in Portland, I met someone who would help me understand what healthy relationships actually look like. David was a social worker who specialized in helping families recover from financial abuse and domestic violence. He understood the psychological impact of what I had experienced with my family, and he never pressured me to forgive or reconcile with people who had systematically exploited me. "Haley, you don't owe anyone forgiveness just because they're related to you," David told me during one of our early conversations about my family situation. "Forgiveness is something you give when someone has genuinely acknowledged their wrongdoing, made amends, and changed their behavior. Your family has done none of those things." David's perspective helped me understand that my decision to maintain distance from my family wasn't cruel or selfish, it was a necessary form of self-protection. Building a life free from their manipulation and exploitation wasn't betraying family values. It was finally learning to value myself enough to demand respect and reciprocity in my relationships. 2 years after the fake emergency phone call, I was finally able to purchase my first home using the money I had recovered from my family's theft plus additional savings from my new job. The small craftsman-style house had 2 bedrooms, a garden where I could grow my own vegetables, and enough space for the quiet, peaceful life I had always dreamed of. Standing in my new kitchen on the day I got my house keys, I reflected on everything that had led me to this moment. The $22,000 my family had tried to steal from me was now part of the down payment on my own home. The independence and security they had tried to undermine had become the foundation of my new life. I learned that family isn't defined by blood relationships or shared genetics, it's defined by mutual love, respect, and support. My chosen family of friends, colleagues, and David provided all the emotional connection and belonging I had been seeking from relatives who saw me only as a source of financial support. The experience taught me that sometimes the people who claim to love us the most are actually the ones who are willing to hurt us the most. My family's willingness to put me through such emotional torture for money revealed that their love was conditional and self-serving rather than genuine and protective. Most importantly, I learned to trust my own instincts and professional judgment instead of automatically believing people who tried to manipulate me with guilt and emotional pressure. The nursing skills that made me question my family's fake medical emergency were the same critical thinking abilities that would protect me from future exploitation. 3 years later, I can honestly say that my life is happier, healthier, and more fulfilling than it ever was when I was constantly sacrificing for family members who didn't appreciate or reciprocate my support. I have genuine relationships built on mutual respect and care. I have financial security that doesn't depend on constantly bailing out other people's poor decisions. I have peace of mind that comes from surrounding myself with people who want the best for me rather than people who see me as a resource to be exploited. The fake emergency phone call that woke me up at 1:03 in the morning was actually the beginning of my real life. Sometimes the worst betrayal leads to the greatest freedom, and sometimes losing toxic family members is the first step toward finding genuine love and belonging. Have you ever experienced manipulation from family members who used guilt and emotional pressure to exploit you financially? How do you distinguish between genuine family emergencies and situations where people are trying to take advantage of your kindness? I'd love to hear your thoughts and experiences in the comments below. If this story resonated with you, please give it a like and subscribe for more true stories about overcoming family betrayal and building healthier relationships. Don't forget to share this video with anyone who might be dealing with similar manipulation from people they trust. Thank you so much for listening to my story, and remember that you deserve relationships built on genuine love and mutual respect, not exploitation disguised as family loyalty. Take care of yourselves, and I'll see you in the next video.